Hello and welcome to the GoalLink Show. My name is Ben Harris, founder of GoalLink, a goal-setting community sharing weekly challenges. These challenges are inspired by brands to bring you new ways to develop and improve yourself. You can kick back and watch me take on these exciting and uncomfortable challenges, or you can join me. I challenge every listener to complete these weekly goals. Catch the content on Instagram or Facebook at GoalLink Group. The GoalLink Show, this podcast recounts experiences from the achievers of the world. But not just the success. We delve into the challenges and struggle we all face. How do we find the will to push through? What role do motivation, discipline, and failure play in our lives? Let's talk about the progress and not just the result. We discuss this and much more on the show. Thanks for tuning in. This week, we have my friend Jason on the show. He's recently left the traditional corporate world and become a financial advisor in a commission-only environment, where usually you find some shady shenanigans because it's commission-only, but why he believes doing the right thing will build his business organically. And these are some of the more things that we go into. The employee mindset, what it is and how to break out of it, how his moment of inspiration relates to watching a sunrise and not experiencing a bright light in darkness, how our parents make financial mistakes out of love, embracing the pain now saves us from more pain later, and how this relates to saving and investing your money, how looking for ways to make better financial decisions is the first and most critical step. You can't make changes until you start looking for them. Why he's okay losing a good life to gain a great life. I'm excited for this interview, so let's jump right into it. All right, Jason, my man, thank you for being here. Before we jump into your new adventure, I want to know about your financial mistakes or things that you would go back and change. So tell the community, just like looking back in the past, what would you change if you could go back?
Sure. It was my wife and I, when we first got married, were extremely conscious of all our finances.
Mm-hmm.
And so, any credit card debt we put on, we would immediately pay it off. We bought a home early on to try and ensure that our money was being invested instead of just kind of going to waste, which is debatable now as I look back, right? I mean, to rent, to buy, whatever. Grant, Uncle G will tell you don't buy, right? But, and that's still something that, I'm figuring out for myself and my family. But, we had an incredible home in Sandy, built in 1961. It was real old, but we put a ton of work and love into that home. And then, we found ourselves looking. We had a friend who sold and made some really good money. Surprisingly, we had only been there 2 years. We saw an opportunity to build, and obviously these new builds and the way the prefab is compared to the old homes is just very enticing initially. Yeah. Now I'm almost sick of it and would prefer to go back into something with character, right, in air quotes. But, buying that second home, I look at, in my opinion now, I wish I had never done that. Just upgrading cars. It's the same old, right? I made promotions quick. My wife was in a pretty good role, so we were making more money than either of us had ever made. And so you make more money and you figure out ways to spend it instead of figuring out ways to save it. And so it was really just compounding issues, where we were just figuring out ways to spend the money that we were bringing in.
Wait, isn't that interesting? I love how you said compounding issues instead of, usually with finance, you think compounding interest, like it's doing something for you, but you were getting more money and it was doing something like against you.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to ruminate on that one later.
Yeah.
So you decided to make the jump, and how long before you made the jump? I think you were thinking about it for a couple years. Is that right?
Yeah.
So from the moment you learned about the job, you waited a year, and then you were kind of training and getting more invested, doing it part-time for a couple years, and then you finally made the jump, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So right now, in this current day and age, I feel like people want, well, I don't know. Well, I guess I'm not even guessing. I know that people want instant gratification. As far as 3 years isn't even a long time, but you were doing it on the side, right?
Correct.
And so what made you finally say, okay, I've done this enough on the side. Why is it now time to do this? Like, I'm fully jumping in. Here we go.
So definitely through that first year, mindset wise, I was not there. Skill set wise, maybe haven't changed or evolved a ton since that time, but mindset, I was not ready. I was through and through, I was an employee, and that was what I felt, and that was what I knew, and that's where I was comfortable. And that's generally the majority of us. We're comfortable with that.
That's interesting. And so we've talked about this before, and I think if any employees, in air quotes, are hearing this, they don't understand. So can you break it down a little bit? Like, what's the employee mindset? Like, what does that mindset look like, and how'd you break out of it?
Sure. So it's when you have that employee mindset, the whole idea there is that you have guide rails, right? I mean, you're within a system, you're plugged into a system or into a machine that's kind of functioning and operating. You get more or less work, but you get the same pay. It doesn't really matter, right? That's you have comfortability, if that's a word.
Yeah,
security,
it is,
comfortability. It is a word. I think I know that, but obviously saying it in an interview is scarier. But security, right? You have it's very predictable to an extent. And within that, within those guide rails and within those companies, you have that phrase that's even utilized over and over of ownership, And so throughout my career, I think it was a long time where it was like, okay, you were there when I made one of my first and biggest promotions into my career, and moved into a role where we started a whole department. Started that with a new manager, and then that manager decided that she was going to make a different career change, so she left the company, and it was left to me extremely green, extremely young, and just trying to figure out how to do it. And so I did. It was sink or swim, and just fought to swim, and we built that department, and obviously I didn't do it by myself. A ton of mentorship and guidance from some great individuals and leaders there. But even then, I was not happy because it was a traveling role, which I did not want to be in. I did feel undercompensated during that time. And eventually, when I was able to make the jump back in, and when I was brought back internal, I was no longer traveling, so I changed roles. It was eye-opening to me, the amount or the change in, I was an owner there. I grew that department. In those startups, a lot of times you're working as like a project manager, a business analyst, everything, right? Anyone that was anywhere was asking me about that department, right? And but once I left, it was like I was never there. Nobody remembered that. It was just, now it moves on. And that's not me saying it in a bad way or a negative way. That's just the reality of it. Because that's how it was. It was no longer mine. I had new responsibilities. And so that employee mindset, I guess for me, was just that. It was that I was working within those guide rails, and I was growing and building things that weren't actually mine,
Yeah, and it sounds cool, right? I'll be honest, Jason. Like, it sounds cool to own your own company or be an entrepreneur. It sounds really cool. But it's scary, right? It's frightening.
Definitely.
And you're feeling it, which we'll talk about. Like, really though, people think it's so cool. Like, I want to be my own boss. It's easier not being your own boss. Like you said, it's so much more comforting to like have that reliable paycheck. And so like, why did you end up why is being your own boss more important than being an employee?
So, I look at it this way. For me, it was, I had now been developed and mentored. I had built a skill set and a mindset that, in my opinion, if I didn't utilize it, if I didn't max it out, like our man Ed would say, if I didn't fulfill the potential that I feel that I have and that I've been blessed with, from a skill set perspective, from a mindset perspective, and overall, just pedigree. If I didn't ever branch out, then I don't feel I could ever max out that potential.
That makes complete sense to me. Do you remember one of the first moments that you noticed your mind shift? Let's hopefully your mind isn't shit. But like, it was shifting, what was something that inspired it? Like, did you learn something, read something? Was someone tell you something? Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I remember very clearly. I had been in the financial services industry, half in, half out for some time, just over a year probably. And I had a very good friend that I worked with, a close friend, who told me, I probably, it was just the beginning of the year, and he told me I probably won't be here, for very long. And so, things we had some drastic changes at Works to where I'd become much more comfortable, much more happy.
At your 9 to 5?
Yes, at my previous job. And so I'd become much more content, to kind of maybe just settling back in, and that's the temptation that you feel, and so I had felt that very strongly, getting ready to settle back in and, ride it out and, hope to make the best of it. And, once again, and this is not to knock if anybody's decision is to be in that career path, that trajectory, but for me, it was, once again, I felt it was a waste. I felt it was a sin, even a sin of omission.
Interesting.
To stay there and to not try and bless people's lives in the way that I felt I could.
At least try, right?
Exactly.
Go for it.
Exactly. And so when that friend told me that, it blew my mind because things were so good. There was a lot, at work where everyone goes through it, but there was a lot of times where I just wasn't as happy as I felt like I should be, and blah, 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 maybe some entitlement in there, But at that point, it was good. Everything was good. And so having that mindset shift kind of felt like it was coming from a much more pure space or area.
I like it instead of like, I'm leaving because I don't like it.
Exactly. Things were good. I felt like some of the wrongs maybe they had done to me had been rectified, by some good leadership, some great leadership there. And so it was, I had that little mindset shift. And so I started seeking out guidance, right? So I started doing what everybody does. I just wanted to kind of get motivated. And so I just YouTubed, Tony Robbins,
I love it.
And that literally opened a whole new world of personal development. I listened to Tony, and then just slowly it just branched into other individuals. And the more and more that I listened, the more enamored with personal development and growth I became, and I just realized more and more, and I was just filled more and more with hope and belief and faith in myself and in my skill set and
that's cool.
And the potential that I had. So it wasn't necessarily right. I like to compare it. In fact, there's an individual who compares. There's questions in from a religious standpoint of how you feel promptings from God and the Spirit. And the best way I ever heard it described, it was in a discourse once, it was that you could either feel it was like compared to being in a dark room and the light turns on, right? Or it was like being out in the open and watching the sunrise.
Ooh,
and so
I've never heard that.
So there was a moment where I was definitely, pushed along with my good friend who told me that. But then it was a slow sunrise of, 9 months of me filling myself with content and knowledge and wisdom from guys who are doing it and are putting content out there for me, and for other people like me, like you, what you're doing, right? And so it was a slow, steady sunrise of knowledge and wisdom that I was just taking in constantly until I felt like I had built the mindset to match the skill set, to match the endeavor and the goal,
All right. And that is a great answer, by the way. But for the people, it doesn't matter. Jason mentioned earlier that it doesn't matter if you're okay being an employee, that's all right.
Yeah. So,
but how could you apply the same mindset if you are an employee, of being an owner, or you know what I mean? How can we apply that mindset in our 9 to 5 or our day to day if we're okay, being that employee?
Definitely, right. I have I've had, like I said, some great mentors in my life that have built their careers in the corporate world that I appreciate, look up to, revere. And so once again, it is all up to each individual. how they want to fulfill, their own destiny or create their own destiny. I listened to an interview once, and it was an individual. I can't remember his name now, but he's the creator of the Hot Cheetos. So I don't know if you ever listened to that one. He was the creator of the Hot Cheetos, and he was a janitor who had never, he'd never finished school. I don't think he could read at the time, and almost out of dumb luck, they told everybody, hey, we want to create empowerment. So he tries to call the CEO and tell him about this idea, and most people won't try and do that because they don't believe it right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And here he becomes a huge VP and executive for multiple companies and created a career path in that role. In my mindset now, more than ever, I understand the idea of ownership. And so if you're building a career, wherever you're building it, ownership is the key, right? It's owning what you're doing. It's maxing out whatever you're doing. It's being the best at it. And it's looking for opportunities continuously, shamelessly. And whatever you have to do to achieve that, that's the goal.
Yeah, right. Like whatever you're doing, own it and make sure you're happy doing it and be the best at it.
Exactly.
All right, let's jump into some of the financial realm. So you're, advising people of what to do with their finances. What's one mistake that you've seen someone make, almost like just a tragic mistake? For me, I assume it's probably someone who's a bit older, has mismanaged their money. Me and you can both relate, like with our parents, right? Of mismanaging money. Like they don't have retirement, no 401k. If 50, 60 plus, still have to work, right?
Yes.
And it's worrisome, not only for them, but for their kids. We'll jump into the positive right after. So don't tune away once you hear, this sad story. But what's one moment, or what's the most tragic thing that you've seen so far?
So I'm going to answer it with a principle, okay? Because I believe in principles. I believe in being a principle-based person. And there's a principle in life of that a lot of us misunderstand and we don't get right, and that's a principle of love, right? And in my mind, a lot of times we think that helping others avoid pain is love. And
dude, you just sound like Will Smith right there, just so you know.
Did I?
Big Willie up in here.
Okay. So but helping, that feeling, so I look back to my parents, and obviously this would be my first interview that would ever be public. Don't know if they'd ever hear it, but I feel like they made a lot of bad financial decisions out of love for us as kids.
Yeah, mine too.
And
it's not like, hey, I'm thinking about when I'm 70, so I'm going to spend my money like this. It's like, nope. Exactly. We have 5 kids or whatever, and we got to take care of them.
Exactly. And on top of that, it's like, I felt like, I had a high capacity for suffering as a youth. We didn't have a lot, and my parents worked hard. Both of them worked hard. And like I said, a lot of what they did when it came to some of those bad decisions was out of love. But they were still bad decisions,
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so that principle to me is it rings true. And I was talking with a young individual yesterday, and he's 30. And so, I told him, like, if you think that in 10 years you'll be able to make bigger sacrifices and change your mindset then, but you can't make those sacrifices and change your mindset now, you're mistaken, and that's me being upfront. That's me being bold with people. And that's me, telling them the truth though. And that is the truth. Because guess what, in 10 years, and this was a young guy, 29, 30 years old with one young child. It's like, you want more kids, 4 more kids. You could have 3 or 4 more kids in 10 years.
Yeah.
And guess what? Circumstances change.
Life only gets harder.
Yeah. Or you might want a new house or this or that, and so the decision now to make sacrifices, and just like what Tony says in Money Master the Game, figuring out how to do it now and make those sacrifices to put away now and hurt more now, right? That principle of pain, of being willing to not put off or delay your pain and your gratification, will save you from a lot more pain that you'll feel in the future, and so going back to that same principle with individuals who make bad decisions potentially out of love or what they feel is love, I would have been fine. Like me and my siblings would have been fine if we didn't have as much. Period. We would have been fine. We would have been stronger. And they could have been a little more selfish in the way that they prepared. And in my opinion, that selfishness would have potentially taught us better principles and lessons than what we learned in contrast.
Yeah. So would that be your tip to, whether you're not a parent or whatever, like what's your one tip? It sounds like, what's just one basic principle that we can all apply financially so we can still enjoy now, but make sure we're taking care of our future?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to say, it would just be to learn to endure that pain now. Like whether it's looking at tax advantaged options where you're paying those taxes up front, right? Roth options. Getting it out of the way now, when you look at a country that has the debt that we have, what do you think taxes are going to be like when you and I go to retire? That's the question you ask yourself. Yeah, it's more painful now, but if you learn to endure the pain now and cut whatever sacrifices you need to now, you'll be glad, you'll be grateful in the end,
Yeah, I love that concept. And I look at it in another way too of, we often say we'll be happy when, right? The same concept, like I'll be happy when I get a promotion.
Yeah.
Or once I make 100K, I'll be happy.
Exactly.
Like, if you're not happy right now, why are you going to be happy when this specific thing happens? If and when you do get that one thing, you'll find yourself in the same spot the next day.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
I love that.
Okay. So that principle applies to finance. But, when I thought of it in terms of pain, I was actually listening to a video that was not talking about finances, right? It was talking about pain and regret, it was talking about someone who was trying to avoid pain now, right? And then at the end of their life, the pain that they feel is the pain of regret, the pain of suffering, the pain of not having done more. And instead, early on, they were avoiding that pain of embarrassment, rejection, failure, all those different things.
That sounds like
right?
Ed Milet.
So a total principle. Yeah, it's a principle and that's why I like principles, because it's applicable through many different facets, right?
Yeah, one cool thing I've done financially this year for myself is, one of my goals I made earlier this year was to cut off, I can't remember exactly, but it was call a couple people, like my internet bill, cancel HBO, lower my car insurance. We've talked about that. Yep. Lowering your car insurance. Like, I paid $180 for car insurance. I switched. This is not a shout out, but it is kind of a shout out for Geico, because it did save me whatever their slogan is. Now I pay $90. Like, I pay half.
Yeah.
Like I canceled HBO. I don't need to pay $15 a month to watch Netflix. I switched to T-Mobile. My Netflix is now included. Like, you can do, if you just ask questions and you look, I mean, just Google it. Googling is easy.
Yeah.
And you can I think I've cut my bills by like $200 a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a ton of money.
That's cool.
And for some young families that are out there, once again, it's just because you're active and involved in it. That's above the average, right? You're active and involved in it. And if you are just looking, then you'll find areas in which you can create savings. $200 to a young family can be life-changing.
Yeah, I like it. You just got to start looking. When you made this big jump, we're switching back to the job change.
Yeah.
You mentioned your wife earlier, and she seems, well, I know her, so I know she's awesome. But what are some difficult conversations? Because this is being real. We're not like saying, oh man, good job, Jason, you made the jump. Like,
yeah,
you made it, This is real life, and it affects like your kids, your wife, like you, I'm not going to lie. Like, I met Jason the other week, and it was like 8 at night or something. So he's probably been working like 10, 12 hours. And I saw his eye twitch, like, like your eyelid. And I'm like, dude, I know this guy is going so hard, because I've had the same thing. I remember like when I've been awake too long or worked too hard, like my eyelid twitches.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So that's a compliment. But what are some realistic, but most likely difficult conversations that you've had with your family so that they can support you, so other people can relate of what they might need to do with their own families?
Sure. I would preface this with saying, anyone who feels, about personal development issues, that they're hokey or this or that, have a mindset shift right now.
Yeah.
First off, because, and I started listening to those things, and I started trying to share it with everybody that I knew, right? Because it was changing everything about me. And, my wife, love her to death. She was a little reluctant at times to like listen to things, right? I was like, hey, just listen to this interview while you're doing your daily duties or while you drive. Do it because it'll make a difference, And so it was, like I said, a very long process, but we went through many difficult discussions, and now she's been prepared for this journey. Not just through a lot of like that content, but just through us and me trying to relay those types of things and instilling that belief and hope that I feel in her, and her back to me, right? Because it is necessary to have that reciprocation within a relationship and with everything in life, right? But yeah, I mean, I remember, one time, and it wasn't like she didn't want me to make the jump. She liked the security, but she liked the security, right? She wanted me to be my own boss, but she liked the security. And I remember one time we had a conversation. I had just finished sitting through like a seminar, and so I was jacked up, right?
Yeah.
I was probably amped up on some adrenaline and whatnot, and feeling real good. And the conversation we had over the phone, which probably shouldn't have been a phone conversation, but I think I just couldn't think straight either. And so another lesson there: don't act on emotion, right? So I came back down from that high.
You probably said like, "I'm quitting tomorrow."
I came back down from that high to think logically and objectively through it. But still, the conversation we had at the time, I still remember very vividly because she said to me, we were talking on the phone. I said, I think I'm ready, I think I'm ready to quit my job, and go after this. This is commission only, but, the opportunity is huge. It's the finance industry. And she, I remember her saying like, well, what about our home? What about everything we have? What about the life we've built? And the words were very similar to this, maybe not exactly verbatim, but very similar was, we've built a good life. I don't want to lose our good life. And, I just remember saying, well, do you want to live a good life the rest of our life, or do you want to live a great life? And that just has stuck with me forever, even because it just kind of came to me in that moment as well. But it was like, the discussions from there have been, okay, like, yeah, we've built a good life. Are we good with that? Are we okay with that? In Utah now, to get a quarter of an acre, you're spending, $500,000, $600,000 on a home, And so that question, begs the question, like, what do you want? What do you want in life? And it's a decision. You make the decision, then you go for it. And so, obviously in that moment, it wasn't super well received by my wife, but it's a process,
Yeah.
And so as we went through it together and we're able to expand our visions together of the faith that we have in me, and the faith that we have in God to help me get there, and get where we want to be and where we could be if we decided. It was then, having that mindset shift of, yeah, we are willing to give up this good life. Yeah, if things went south, then we're okay losing everything.
I like that.
We'll do whatever we need to fulfill my potential and max out our lives.
That's cool. So to echo this, you were okay losing your good life in order to get a great life.
Yeah. In fact,
I love that.
We are still currently constantly in the process of deciding, do we want to stay in our home, or should we just sell it and hit the reset button while we're still young? I'm 29 and once again, it's like, we did build a good life, but we're weighing it out and deciding, because
you still have so much time.
Exactly. And even like Uncle G says, maybe I shouldn't have bought in the first place. Maybe I should have been renting this whole time. And we got a ton of equity. We put cash in the bank and no stresses for a long time while I build and grow. And so it's all a huge, weighing out game, and tons of prayer, tons of meditation, tons of all of the above, and discussion and open, objective discussion. And so we have that discussion. It's an ongoing process, right? This isn't like the end story. This is you catching me at the beginning.
Yep.
At the beginning.
Which I love. So everyone listening, this is just the beginning. Jason you started or you quit your job just over a month ago, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you're fresh, straight into it.
Very much so.
And so we will talk again in a year. We'll shake on it just so we can see where you are in a year. And again, a year is not even a long time, but I know that you'll be just in a much better situation. And one could assume that you are stressing financially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, thank you for being honest. Like, I think it's like, why not just be honest about it?
Yeah.
Like, most of us probably are in some way or another, whether it's through stupidity or by choice. You know what I mean? But besides financial stress, this whole situation of making the jump to your own hustle, what's been the biggest challenge?
My wife said to me the other day, it's like, she knew this, but she had an expectation of like, well, now you don't have to go into the office.
Oh,
And I get to pick and choose my hours and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But she's like, but now you're working like way more than you were working before. And it was like, but that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's desirable, compared to the alternative. Right. And so, that's been big. But honestly, I think the biggest challenges just outside of finances is people. I care about people a ton. Like in this industry, you have to have integrity. You have to be willing to do the right thing. I told you, and I tell everybody that I work with and sit down with, my goal is always transparency and over communication throughout the process. And I'm okay with rejection. I'm okay with, no's. I'm okay with all of the above. I hate lack of communication. It really frustrates me. It really does, just because I know what I have to bring to the table, and I know the ways in which I can serve people and the way that I can change their lives. But some people are just not open to it, and that's okay, but
it's a timing.
But it is, that's hard, Rejection is hard. I think that's why the first year I wasn't ready to be rejected, and every time I got rejection, it was like, the sky was falling, right? And so I prepared myself,
How do you get over rejection and all the no's that you hear? Because what's the percentage, right? Probably the people you reach out to. How many people agree to a meeting?
Maybe I would say somewhere between 50 and 70%.
Okay, so that's pretty good, actually. So,
it is.
So 50% agree to a meeting. How many people actually sign up with the services out of those 50%?
Yeah, so I would say in that area, since I've been doing this, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80%.
Yeah, which
it's pretty
is good.
high. It is.
It's probably just you and your charming ways.
Well, and hopefully, once again, my goal is with everybody that I work with is find solutions that are right for them.
Well, and you actually care, and I think that's a big thing, like, because you've seen how it can affect you and your own family, and you've seen why it matters.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, that's the whole goal of what I'm doing is to implore people to make changes, right? I told that story about my parents, and it's like, had somebody stepped in and had the discussions that I have with individuals, then it could have changed their lives, but nobody ever did, right?
Yeah.
And so when I step in, it's not just it's not at all about a commission or a check, and it is everything about what is right for those individuals. And the reason why I see it that way is because I know that my business will grow organically. That's
no matter what, it's going to.
It's going to grow organically when I do it the right way and when I do the right thing, And I know that people will feel that in the way that I act, the way I present myself, the way I work with them. They'll feel the honesty and the sincerity, and they'll trust me, whether it is to just refer business, than it is to work with us.
That is awesome. So, quick plug for you: if they want to know about these financial benefits, where can they find you?
Good question. I mean, they can find me through you. Currently, I to be honest, I've built everything through word of mouth. So I'm in the process of building a website, so I can get that to you if you'd like to have that by the time this posts.
Yeah, send me the website.
Yeah, but there's Yeah, word of mouth. I mean, through you.
Okay,
And,
cool. So yeah, if this does interest you, message me on like Instagram, Facebook, email, whatever it
yeah.
is. Um, all right, so we've come to the segment of the show where I randomly scroll through my phone and I pick a note or a thought of inspiration that I've learned from reading or listening to something or a conversation. And I call it Scroll My Soul. And this is what I have for you, good sir. So tell me how you resonate with this.
Sure.
I think you will. So people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So what are your thoughts on that?
So people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate in 10 years.
Yep.
It goes back to the principle of feeling lack of patience
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time lack of vision, in my opinion. You know, in this life, once again, if you're talking about from a business standpoint, as an entrepreneur, as a business builder, owner, as a builder, as a creator, or as an employee, you know, it's really hard to look forward a year. Or you're talking about finances. It's really hard to look forward past this month and this next paycheck. And it's really hard to look forward 10 years and 20 years. You know, I have a friend, and one time I asked him, he told me he was 34. And so I was at the time 29. Yeah, I'm 29 still. So it was this year. But I thought about that and I'm like, okay, 5 years. And I thought, what would be different in 5 years? And I was like, wow, my daughter will be 8. That's mind blowing. I mean, especially when you see it in children, right? I may not have changed. She's gotten a little fatter, you know, like whatever. But you look at a child in 5 years is like just insane amount of growth, right? My new daughter will be 5. And so then the question is who am I in 5 years, you know? And so that's what I think about when I think about that quote, because in a year, I feel like, once again, we're too impatient with certain things, and we're trying to hit home runs too fast in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
You know, I never looked at financial services. This is not a way to just hit things off big and fast. It is a grind, but I'm building. You know, everything that I do, I'm building, and that is hopeful. That gives you hope. That gives you strength. That gives you courage. It gives you faith. And so when I look at this, I know that in a year I'll be a different man because of this, because of what I'm doing. But I know that in 10 years I will have built for myself, right? And it won't be like it was when I was in my corporate role, where okay, I'm going to transition and then poof, that's somebody else's baby, you know, and that's somebody else's job to oversee it. No, what I'm doing, and in 10 years, I will have built. Everything that I'm doing is a step towards building. Every person that I talk to, every person that I meet with, you know, every time that I get uncomfortable, every rejection or failure that I get, everything that happens throughout that process will be building. And so in 10 years, you know, I feel like I have built the ability to foresee and look, I mean, and to have a vision of what can be accomplished within 10 years, and gets me out of bed every day.
Dude, I love it.
You know,
I will just leave it at that, because that was beautiful.
Hopefully that was all coherent.
No, it was. It's very
because I'm good at tangents. And
loud and clear, sir.
rambling.
So thank you so much for being on here, Jason. Do you have any last tips, advice, or wisdom to impart on us before you go?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, the whole deal is that I loved that personal development space so much because it changed my life, because it changed my mindset. You know, there's a guy, and I can't remember his name once again, but just I listened to so much content, and that was the piece of advice that changed his life. Change your mindset, change your life. And so I had to have that mindset shift, but everybody has the capacity to do that. Everybody has the potential to fulfill their actual dreams, not the dreams that they're subject to within the vehicle that they've chosen or that they're in currently, but to actually fulfill their dreams. It's just a matter of being, and hey, some of us are further along. Some of us have a different skill set. Some of us are blessed with different skill sets. But we all have the ability to develop. We all have the ability to grow, and we all have the ability to change that. And so it's a decision. And so if I had to tell somebody, then it's start making good decisions on a daily basis.
Dude, I love it. Dude, I'm pumped right now. I'm not going to act on emotions, but this is a rational decision anyway. This is going to be really cool because you're a guy who's speaking like this, who's so confident, but you're not a month into it, but we'll say a month into it of just full bore into it. And then we're going to see in a year, who knows, maybe I'm underestimating your 1 year, but in 10 years from now, we're going to see what you've built, and it's for the long term. And I'm excited that this is just documentation of where you're going to end up, and it's going to be super cool.
And can I say one more thing?
You know it, man.
In that month since I've left, I will say that I have had multiple revelatory business and mind-changing moments. Mm-hmm. And I felt like a lot of that came to me and I was blessed with or imparted on me because of that decision. And so I have no doubt in a year, I know who I want to be, and the goal is I'll be fighting to become that person.
Dude, think of just that 1 month times 12.
Exactly.
Sweet, man. Okay, Jason, we'll talk to you in a year. So, again, thank you, sir. You're awesome.
See you guys in a year.
I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Jason. We'll touch back up with him in a year to see how his progress is going. And this week's challenge is inspired by Vivint Smart Home. Be home and be present for the holidays. Your gift should be your presence, not only physically, but truly invested in each moment. We will never have these moments back, so please remember this challenge throughout the holidays and even be mindful with your favorite in-laws. There are a few ways you can report back once you complete the challenge. You can post on Facebook or Instagram using #GoalLinkChallenge, comment on this episode-specific post on Facebook or Instagram, send us a private message, or use the GoalLink hotline. To use the hotline, call 385-626-0525 and follow the instructions. Thank you all for tuning in this week. Please keep this challenge in mind throughout the holidays. I hope they're amazing. My name is Ben. This has been The GoalLink Show.